This is an account of the operation of Southampton, the port of Southampton, during World War II. It is taken from the Technical Services, the Transportation Corps Operations Overseas by Joseph Bykovsky and Harold Larson. It's from the Center of Military History, United States Army, Washington, D.C., 1990. The 14th major port was the unit based in the Art Gallery rooms at Southampton and was the headquarters for the US Army during D-Day and Operation Overlord. This section is called Port Operations. The first requisite for the smooth flow of troops and supplies into the United Kingdom was efficient port operations. When Colonel Ross reached the British Isles, the US Army already had a small port organisation in Northern Ireland. Soon thereafter, he extended American port activity to the Glasgow, Liverpool and Bristol Channel areas, all of which had the great advantage of being relatively safe from enemy action by air and by sea. Subsequently, as the need arose, he placed organisations at other ports, notably at London and Southampton. Because of the continuing danger from enemy air attack, no substantial use was made of the excellent discharge facilities at London until 1943. In April, 8 vessels carrying Lend-Lease cargo originally destined for the Soviet Union were diverted to London. Since these ships carried ammunition, they were dispersed along the Thames River to minimise the risk. Having no port personnel, the regional transportation officer at London drafted local railway traffic officers to assist in supervising the discharge operations. Working an average of 82 hours a week, these regional transportation officers supervised cargo discharge until mid-July 1943, when the 14th port, under the command of Brigadier General Joseph L. Phillips, arrived and took over the activity. In the following December, the 12th port began relieving the 14th port, which was slated to expand its operations at Southampton and Plymouth and prepare for the cross-channel attack. By the end of January 1944, the 12th port was operating in London, Hull and Immingham, and it continued to do so until transferred to Normandy shortly after D-Day. During the last half of 1943, the 14th port supervised the discharge of approximately 350,000 measurement tons of cargo at London, Southampton and Plymouth. Of that amount, 162,224 measurement tons were received at Southampton. After being relieved at London, the 14th port confined its work to Plymouth and Southampton, of which the latter was to become the main installation. Southampton became the principal US port on the south coast. In peacetime, a thriving passenger port and familiar gateway for visitors to the British Isles, it had suffered severely from enemy bombing. As a result, the port had remained idle for some time, and much of its cargo handling equipment had been removed to other ports. Yet, despite the considerable damage, Southampton remained one of the best ports in England. Deep water and relatively little tide made it a port of few locks, and there were numerous modern piers, as well as 7 graving docks for ship repair. Although many British officials feared that the port was too vulnerable, the Americans reopened it in the summer of 1943, and the fears were soon found to be without foundation. Early US operations were handicapped by the shortage of cargo handling equipment and by labour troubles. Labour at Southampton, as elsewhere in Britain, was in short supply and none too efficient. During the summer and fall of 1943, the activity of the 14th port at Southampton was interrupted by a number of strikes, several of which represented protests against the presence of American military police who were stationed in the hatches to prevent pilferage. Nevertheless, by October, cargo operations had increased substantially. Early in 1944, the headquarters of the 14th port was moved from London to Southampton. Fairly compact office space and a sufficient number of billets were obtained in and near the city by using various structures, including the Plymouth Barracks, a wing of the Civic Centre, a school and 2 hotels. In the ensuing months, cargo handling facilities were greatly improved, and except for minor squabbles, labour disputes practically ceased. Southampton, together with the other ports along the southern and eastern shores of Great Britain, including the Thames and Humber River areas, contributed substantially to the build-up in the British Isles by receiving cargo diverted from the heavily burdened Bristol Channel and Mersey River ports, particularly after July 43. But Southampton's principal wartime contribution was to be made as a port of embarkation rather than a port of discharge. In the months preceding the cross-channel assault, the emphasis in transportation cooperations increasingly shifted from receiving personnel and cargo to planning and preparing for the outbound movement to the continent. Since southern England was close to Normandy and the scene of the greatest concentration of American troops, the ports in that area were the logical installations from which to mount and support the invading forces. During May 44, with Lieutenant Colonel Leo J. Mayer in command, all cargo discharge operations ceased at Southampton, and the port personnel concentrate their efforts on preparation for the Normandy invasion. From D-Day onward, the Southampton port of embarkation had a key role in the outbound movement of US troops, equipment and supplies to the continent. A major port activity at this time was the loading of vehicles and drivers aboard specially converted Liberty ships for delivery across the Channel. Because of its proximity to the continent, its excellent facilities and experienced army port organisation, Southampton remained active to the end of the war. In an article for the US Army Transportation Journal called Forgotten Ports, Staff Sergeant Erwin Swerdlow, writing in October 45, says, "Early in May, a month before D-Day, Southampton and its litter of subports became the focus in the preparation for the great outbound movement to the continent. These subports, operated by the 14th Port, with headquarters at Southampton, included Portland, Weymouth, Truro, Plymouth, Falmouth, Dartmouth, Hale, Totnes, Hamble and Poole." He goes on to say, between June the 6th and May the 8th, Southampton handled approximately 8,000 vessels. All the subports together with Southampton handled slightly over 9,500 ships. Over an 11-month period, the 14th Port handled almost 28 ships a day. Weymouth loaded 2,100 LSTs, that's landing ship tanks, and 1,500 LCTs, landing craft tanks. Southampton loaded 1,500 LSTs and 1,700 LCTs and 1,070 MTs, which are motor transports. He concludes by saying, between D-Day and VE Day, the forgotten ports of the UK gave convincing proof that they also serve to furnish the necessary transportation. Now that the back trailer movement is well on its way, all eyes are strained towards Southampton and the short voyage home.